If Dean Ambrose were to return to WWE right now, at this exact juncture where Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and CM Punk are deeply entangled in the most complex feud of the modern era, it would send shockwaves through every layer of the company. His reemergence wouldn't just be a nostalgic moment or a brief detour. It would instantly destabilize and transform the fragile alliances, power struggles, and emotional stakes that have defined this three-way war. Ambrose's name hasn't been uttered on WWE television in years, but his ghost has hovered around both Reigns and Rollins in every moment they've tried to assert their dominance as solo superstars. Now that Paul Heyman has betrayed both Reigns and Punk to align with Seth Rollins, there's an undeniable void of trust and an opportunity for a seismic disruption. Ambrose stepping back into this story is not a return to the Shield, as fans remember it. It's an unpredictable insertion of a man who has walked a wildly different path, forged a harsher identity, and carries a bitter understanding of how his two former brothers have evolved without him. Roman Reigns, who is reeling from Heyman's betrayal and teetering between redemption and renewed tyranny, would immediately view Ambrose's return through a lens of suspicion and paranoia. For the past half-decade, Reigns has stood as the singular alpha, manipulating family, factions, and corporate power to maintain his status as the tribal chief. His insecurities, long masked by Heyman's sycophancy and the bloodline's muscle, have now been exposed by Seth Rollins' Machiavellian maneuvering. The sudden reappearance of Ambrose, someone who knows Roman's personal weaknesses better than anyone, and who is immune to intimidation, would be uniquely unsettling. Ambrose would not come back to fall in line with either of the power structures Roman and Seth have built. He wouldn't be a pawn in a bloodline civil war or a disciple in Rollins' self-styled messiah complex. Instead, he would stand as an independent force, driven less by nostalgia and more by a deep-seated need to reclaim the narrative of his career, which many fans argue was hijacked when he left WWE. Seth Rollins, freshly empowered by his alliance with Heyman, would likely be the quickest to try and manipulate Ambrose's return to his advantage. Rollins' character thrives on intellectual superiority, using charm and mind games to stay one step ahead of his rivals. He would frame Ambrose's return as an opportunity to rekindle a brotherhood, claiming that their shared history and mutual disdain for Roman could serve a higher purpose. But unlike previous eras, Ambrose would not be swayed by Rollins' silver tongue. His time away, characterized by brutal matches, unfiltered promos, and a disdain for corporate shackles, would have hardened him into someone incapable of being seduced by Rollins' rhetoric. Their dynamic would not be one of old friends reunited, but of two former allies with unhealed scars, each unwilling to submit to the other's vision of power. CM Punk, the current X-factor in this feud, would approach Ambrose's return with a rare blend of curiosity and caution. Punk's feud with both Reigns and Rollins has been fueled by long-standing resentment and philosophical clashes over what wrestling should represent. Ambrose, who infamously walked out of WWE on his own terms much like Punk did years prior, represents a living embodiment of the rebellion Punk claims to champion. Punk would be torn between seeing Ambrose as a kindred spirit and recognizing him as a destabilizing variable that could derail Punk's quest for vindication and championship glory. Their mutual respect for each other's defiance could momentarily align them, but Ambrose's unpredictability would prevent any sustained alliance. Beyond the immediate reactions of Reigns, Rollins, and Punk, Ambrose's return would reverberate throughout the locker room and the fan base in a way that transcends a simple comeback pop. His reputation as John Moxley, the man who dominated in AEW, GCW, NJPW, and independent circuits worldwide, has given him a mythic aura that WWE fans can't ignore. He would return not as the zany Lunatic Fringe caricature WWE once shoehorned him into, but as a hardened, violent, philosophical anti-hero who has proven he can thrive outside the WWE machine. This redefinition of his character would force both creative and in-universe characters to recalibrate their strategies. No one could expect him to follow the same rules or play the same political games. His disdain for authority and manipulation would make him a wild card that both excites and terrifies everyone in the ongoing three-way conflict. From a storyline perspective, his insertion could serve to fracture the fragile alliances that have temporarily formed. With Heyman now backing Rollins, there is already a strategic imbalance. Reigns is vulnerable and isolated, with the bloodline crumbling and no longer the unstoppable force it once was. Punk, though fiery and determined, is navigating hostile waters with no clear allies. Ambrose could choose to target Reigns directly, dredging up their personal history to challenge Roman's claims of supremacy. Alternatively, he could expose Rollins' manipulations by aligning, however temporarily, with Punk to undermine Seth's growing empire. But knowing Ambrose, the most compelling direction would see him reject alliances entirely, opting instead to methodically dismantle all three men as a statement that none of them deserve to sit atop the WWE throne, unchallenged. His motivations would be key in elevating this storyline to unprecedented heights. Ambrose wouldn't need to say much. Short, sharp promos dripping with venom and clarity would suffice to establish his mission. He could argue that Reigns and Rollins' obsession with power, belts, and legacy has corrupted them beyond redemption. He could call out Punk for romanticizing rebellion without ever truly burning the system down. His critique would be that while all three men talk about being leaders and icons. None of them have embraced the honest chaos and self-destruction necessary to change the industry. Ambrose's violent, minimalist philosophy would contrast starkly with the calculated politicking of Reigns and Rollins, and the self-aggrandizing crusade of Punk. The in-ring possibilities would be staggering. Roman versus Ambrose, a matchup frozen in time since their last encounters, would carry a raw, visceral energy. Their styles have evolved in polar opposite directions. Roman's deliberate, suffocating offense against Ambrose's frenetic brawling and deathmatch-infused tactics. Seth versus Ambrose would be a cerebral war, blending technical counters with psychological warfare rooted in betrayal upon betrayal. Ambrose versus Punk would be a fresh matchup layered with subtext. Two men who walked away from WWE on their own terms, now testing whether their respective returns have diminished their edge. And the inevitable four-way confrontation, Ambrose, Reigns, Rollins, Punk, would be the most combustible, layered main event WWE has seen in over a decade, where every alliance and attack is laced with history and ambiguity. Paul Heyman's role in all of this cannot be overstated. Heyman, who has just made his most shocking betrayal by siding with Rollins, would likely scramble to neutralize Ambrose before his presence destabilizes Rollins' grip on power. His manipulations of Ambrose during the Shield days, subtle but ever present, would resurface as Ambrose calls him out for orchestrating much of the discord between the three former Shield members. Heyman, realizing Ambrose cannot be bought or reasoned with, might finally meet his match in a man who rejects both the system and the alternative Heyman tries to engineer. This would be a poetic reckoning for Heyman, whose career-long strategy has been to hitch himself to the most dominant force. Ambrose, refusing to be anyone's vehicle, would force Heyman to confront the limits of his influence, even beyond immediate feuds. Ambrose's return would create ripple effects across WWE's roster. Superstars in the mid-card and upper mid-card would view him as either a threat or an inspiration. His presence could galvanize other frustrated talents to break free of corporate molds, reigniting a sense of rebellion that WWE hasn't authentically tapped into since the early days of the Yes Movement or Punk's pipe bomb era, each trying to decipher whether aligning with him is worth the chaos he brings. The creative direction of WWE itself would subtly shift. With Ambrose as a prominent figure, the company would be compelled to lean into more grounded, gritty storytelling. The sanitized, overly polished production style that has dominated since the TKO merger would seem hollow next to Ambrose's raw energy. His style demands unscripted promos, hard-hitting brawls, and long-term narrative payoffs. If handled correctly, his return could serve as the catalyst that forces WWE to embrace a hybrid of its classic storytelling with the realism and edge that modern fans crave. This tonal shift could bleed into other divisions too, elevating the overall product and bridging the gap between hardcore fans and casual viewers. Perhaps the most fascinating element would be how the audience receives Ambrose. His absence has romanticized his WWE tenure, scrubbing away memories of his goofier storylines and accentuating the reality of a man who risked everything to escape creative stagnation. Fans would be ravenous to see how he confronts Reigns, Rollins, and Punk, not as Dean Ambrose, but as the weathered war dog who has conquered other kingdoms. The chants, the social media buzz, the merchandise frenzy, all would explode instantly, giving WWE the type of organic momentum that no amount of manufactured marketing can replicate. In terms of long-term trajectory, Ambrose's return could even redefine what WrestleMania season looks like. Right now, fans have become jaded with predictable Royal Rumble winners, formulaic main events, and cold-planned booking. Injecting Ambrose into that structure would break it open. He wouldn't need to win a Rumble or Money in the Bank to headline WrestleMania. His path would be carved through bodies, rivalries, and story-driven violence. He could arrive at Elimination Chamber and set the structure on fire, literally or figuratively. He could attack a champion unprovoked the night after the Rumble and declare war. He doesn't wait in line, and that approach would reintroduce danger to WWE's most sacred calendar slots. Suddenly, everything becomes volatile, and that's when wrestling is at its best. Imagine the optics of Ambrose standing in the same ring as Reigns and Rollins, 10 years removed from their Shield dominance, not as a brother, but as a ghost they both tried to forget. He would not smile. He would not shake hands. He would simply stare at them, barbed wire in his fists, and remind them that family doesn't survive in the real world, it implodes. That visual alone is enough to carry a WrestleMania main event, not on nostalgia, but on psychological warfare. Fans wouldn't cheer because they remember the Shield. They'd cheer because they know Ambrose will tear it down. And then there's the potential for something even darker. Ambrose returning doesn't mean he has to stay a hero. In fact, it's better if he doesn't. His descent into madness in AEW and the independent scene has added layers to his character that WWE never explored. If he brings that with him, if he drags his chains, his scars, and his history back through the door, he could be the most dangerous villain WWE has seen in decades. He could start with old enemies like Reigns and Rollins, but then turn on the crowd, the system, the very essence of wrestling storytelling itself. He could become the character who cuts the rope on nostalgia and hangs the future from it. That level of thematic depth has been missing in WWE's sanitized product, and it would leave a mark deeper than any match outcome. The truth is, Dean Ambrose's return isn't just a character arc, it's a philosophical correction. WWE has lost its way in the glitter and gloss of corporate synergy. It has traded soul for spectacle, and while fans may cheer for familiar faces, what they really crave is truth. Ambrose represents the brutal, bleeding, broken truth that wrestling is supposed to hurt, to shock, to unsettle. That promos should be venom, not monologues. That matches should be wars, not exhibitions. That returns should ignite revolutions, not applause breaks. From a business standpoint, Ambrose's return at this point in the Roman-Seth Punk saga would likely trigger a surge in viewership, ticket sales, and global interest. WWE's international markets, particularly in the UK and Japan, where Ambrose's post-WWE work has been revered, would re-engage fervently. PLEs headlined by Ambrose-centered storylines could anchor stadium shows, breaking attendance and revenue records. His star power, amplified by the mythology of his AEW and indie run, would turn the ongoing Reigns-Rollins Punk drama from a heavyweight clash into a generational epic. No storyline in WWE's modern history has had the potential to weave this many narrative threads together with such authentic stakes and deeply personal motivations.